Alright, so in this tutorial what we're going to do is we are going to UV this sofa and kind of go from there. What I want you to do is you can either do this sofa, this chair, or you can do a different couch or something that's got basically the same amount of complicatedness as this. So like there's other chairs here if you want, but don't do like this rug. You know what I mean? Like that's not really a thing. Okay, so I'm gonna do this chair, but hopefully it's got just the right amount, I think, for us to be able to do it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna UV it here in a typical kind of old school Maya way, and then we're also going to afterwards go and paint it using Photoshop because that has value as well. All right. So let's kind of go into it. We'll start from the simple and work our way to the more complicated. So the most simple thing is probably this leg here. So I'm going to select the leg. I'm going to go to UV. Let's go to UV editor. All right. So if your UV toolkit isn't there, let's say it's off, you can just grab it, and if you drag it in, it should be right there. Or if you go to tools, and make sure you'll see hide UV, show UV toolkit. So that might be there. Also, it might even show up, or it might not even be an option. If that's the case, go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager, and then you're going to look for Unfold 3D, and just make sure load and auto load, and make sure they're both on, and then restart Maya. I don't think you have to restart the whole computer, but you are going to want to restart Maya. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do this chair here. So I got this leg selected, and let's go ahead and do it. So I'm going to go to the Create section, and we'll just do Automatic. Automatic looks pretty good. I'm pretty okay with it. I could also do, let's say, that's not good. I could also do cylindrical. Okay, or whatever. There we go. Yeah, that's no good. I could do cylindrical, which will give me it basically in a line. The problem is with doing cylindrical is that you're going to see is that it's well, it might not be it's not as obvious here, but it's going to stretch it out a little bit, which I'm not really a huge fan of. So I'm just going to say that probably just the automatic is going to be what we want. So I'm just going to do automatic, and voila. So you can see it's a relatively simple shape. This all looks pretty good. The only thing I would say is that it would be nice. I'm going to click on this to move the UVs, and I'm going to grab them all, and I'm just going to scale them down a little bit, like so. And then I'm just going to move them apart from each other. And the reason for this is that basically it will allow, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take this guy, put these both like take this one, and I'm going to hold J, E and J for increment. I'll rotate it 90 degrees. Go like that. There we go. Just so that it's kind of the same. All right. Okay, so we're going to call that good. I don't think that's that big of a deal. You know, we got to kind of lay it out. I want to have a little bit of a gap, because that way, you know, when you go to paint over, sometimes you paint past the lines and stuff, and I just don't want to deal with that. So it's just a cleaner way of working. So, alrighty, so that looks acceptable. So we're going to call that good. That one's pretty easy. Now, if you click on this one, you'll see it has no UVs. Now, I could go through the whole process again, but trying to make it exactly the same as this sucks. If you were modeling this, what I would tell you to do is model one of the legs, then UV it, and then just duplicate it and make the other legs. That way they all have the same UVs, and you already did it, and you don't have to do it multiple times. But if you're working in a place, it's highly likely that the modeler is going to model stuff, and then if you have to texture it, they're going to be like, I don't know, I just modeled it. And then you're going to have to deal with like UVing it. So there actually is a nice way of doing this. So select this leg, select the good one, hold shift, select the bad one, then go to Mesh, Transfer Attributes, Option Box. And what you're going to see is that basically we can transfer the vertex position. I don't want to do that. The vertex normals, I also don't want to do that. UV sets, yes please. Go ahead and do current, and then color sets off. So basically we want to transfer the UVs. Now the way that it goes about doing it is here, okay? So we're not going to mirror it, we're not going to flip it. What we do want to do is how are we going to sample it? So how are we going to determine what goes to what? So like it's kind of like in what surrounding. are we using? So if we do world, it won't work, because if it looks to the world, this thing to the world is in this position. This one's over here to the world. So it's going to be like weird. It won't work. Local also usually doesn't work. Typically the ones that you want to use are either component or topology, because that uses the objects themselves. Now it is possible, I think, to do different geometry, but you don't really want to do that. So just go ahead and choose component, and then when it does use the component, is it going to go across along the normal or closest point? I find closest point typically works best. Now if this doesn't work on yours, try using topology and try switching out these as well. Like do a different between these four. Typically component and closest point will normally work. So I'm going to hit apply, and then I'll click on this, and you'll see it has the same UVs. So now I can just do the same thing. Click on this guy, and then this guy. I'm just going to hit G since it's the last thing I did. And then again, I'll click this one, and hit G. All right? And I'm going to close that out. So now they all have those UVs, and that's good. All right? So that was pretty easy. Not too awful painful. Yay. Okay. So, next what we want to do is, I usually go from the simple to the most complicated. So let's go to this cushion here. Okay, so I'm going to select it. I'm going to hit Shift-I. And then I'm just going to basically try to get my camera more or less pointing down, like facing it perpendicular. Because I'm picturing, you know, if you look at a couch cushion, it's usually two pieces of fabric. So then we're going to go to here, and I'm just going to go ahead and do camera based. And for whatever reason, I don't know why it keeps doing that. I think it's like stuck on the old camera position. So what it does is it does it based on whatever camera you currently have selected. And maybe it creates a second camera for isolate. I don't know. But all I want you to do is, if you click on here, you'll see this little gray line will pop up. That means that that's the camera that you're in now. So then go ahead and do it again, camera base, and now it works, okay? All right. So what I need to do is this. Basically, it's like an X-ray shot straight through, right? So it's the front and the back. So what I want to do is I just want to cut it. I could do it basically, you want to cut it more or less on the seams, because that way, if you cut the seams for your UVs where the seams are in the actual object, it will make sense. So if there's any irregularity there, you can just kind of paint the actual seam there. Now this cushion, if you look at a couch cushion, is usually sewed one of two ways. Either there's a seam on the top here and on the bottom, and then on the sides all the way through, so it's seamed like a box. Or they'll do one down the center, and then there's folds right here. I'm going to go ahead and do the center and the folds because that's easier. So I'm going to double click. I'm going to go to edge. So you might notice I flick instead of clicking and holding. It's the same thing, but it's just faster. So that's why I do it that way. So I'm going to double click that center seam, and I'm just going to go ahead and do cut. Good. And now it's in two sections. So up here, what I want you to notice is if I click on this, it's going to show me purple here, and you can see I got blue and red. Blue means it's looking from the front. Red means it's flipped, like it's upside down. Because remember, I projected from above, so I projected the back side of this thing, right? So I need to not have it do that. So I'm going to go to my UV select tool here and grab this. I usually don't use that actually, just because I don't feel like going up there and clicking on it. So I'll show you. If you just go to UV, you right click, go to UV shell, or if you're on UV, you can just double click on a UV. If you can do it, W, and then just move it up. All right. So you can see I have a red one, I have a blue one, and that's why they were purple. So I can flip this manually. I could select it, and then I could select it, and then you'll see that there are options to flip it underneath the transform here. So you can flip it. But that's like one extra step. You can actually just go ahead, and if you select them both, and just, because we're going to do this anyways, you hit unfold, and boom, you're going to see that it unfolds it, and when it unfolds it, it actually flips it as well. So you don't actually need to do the flippity flap. Now you can see they're both blue. That's great. But if I click on this guy, what you're going to see is this. Notice that it's red there and a little bit blue there. Okay? So red means that there's not the equivalent space being represented in UVs, meaning that this takes up more area than what it's showing here. And so what's going to end up happening is if I click on this, you can kind of probably tell. Or I'm sorry, less space. See how these are bigger here? And then where it's blue, the squares are smaller? So basically, these need to breathe more. They need to be able to take up more area. Okay. So that's with this one. So this is good to show texture stretching or UV stretching. So I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to snip these corners. So I can do it a couple of different ways. I'll show you a tool. So let's go to the cut tool, and you can just go do. Oh, hang on a second. Might have to be in UVs for this. Yeah. Cut tool. I don't usually use this, to be honest. I don't know if that worked or not. Did it? I don't want to use it anyway. So I'm just going to do this way. So you can see it's a corner, so I can actually just double click that corner, and because it's a terminating corner, it turns into 2. That will work. So I'm just going to click on that, double click, and double click, and then we're going to go ahead and cut that. Okay. Then we'll go to UV, select the whole thing, and hit unfold. Boop. Okay. And now you can see that stretching is gone. Because think about it, you couldn't take a flat sheet of fabric and just, it would all be bunched up right here, right? So usually what they do, again, if you look at a cushion, and I would highly suggest like just having a cushion or something like that, you'll see that what they do is there's a seam there as well. They fold the fabric over, and basically it looks like this, and then they just sew it together, and that's how they get the shape. So now you can see this is nicely laid out, and that looks fine and dandy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guy, and I am just going to straighten it up a little bit here manually. So just going to E for rotate. I'm going to grab this one, and you can see it's a little bit thinner on this side, and this one's a little bit fatter on this side. So I'm going to try and do opposites. Like that. Boom. Okay, so I'm going to select both of them, and then we're going to go down to the, we don't really need a layout. We need layout, and click layout. And then it's going to go ahead and lay them out for us, and that's fine. Now, what I want to do is the same thing as before. I'm just going to move this over to give myself a little bit more breathing room, and voila. So now those UVs look good. So I'm going to have nothing selected. Hit Shift-I. And boom. Now let's do the next one. This is kind of the same thing, but slightly more complicated, we'll say. So I'm just going to go like this. Go ahead and go up to camera based. I don't know why it keeps doing that. Camera based? It's really weird. Alright. And I'm just going to Shift-I so I don't have any of the other stuff. And same thing as before. Double click on this edge loop. Goes all the way around. Cut. And I'm going to go ahead and double click on this. And basically wherever it would fold is where you're going to do this. So right there it would fold, right here it would fold. It would actually not fold. If I cut this, it's not going to benefit me in any way, because this is actually just kind of a piece of fabric that's going across, so it doesn't benefit me. So I'm not going to put a slice there. Just on the terminating edges. You can see how this edge loop ends here, right? See how there's a 3 there, a 3 there, a 3 there? So whenever there's one of those, that's where I'm putting it. Okay, and there. And we'll go ahead and cut that. And I'm going to UV, select the whole thing, and we'll hit unfold. Boop. And come on. There we go. Move that up. That looks acceptable. I'm just going to go ahead and rotate this guy a little more straight. Good. And that one looks pretty straight. So grab them both. And we're just going to go ahead and hit layout, and boom. So I'm just going to go ahead and scale them a little bit smaller. And move this guy down a little bit. And move this guy, well, he's fine. Okay, like that. All right, good. So that one looks good as well. So have nothing selected, hit Shift-I, and now we need to, all right, that guy's good. Yeah. And now we need to do this, okay? So I'm going to select this guy too and go Mesh Display. And let's go ahead and Mesh Display. Where's Soften Edge? Soften Edge. Boom. Okay. It's getting some weird, I don't know if you noticed it, like the normal's a little bit weird. Okay. So let's go ahead, and now we're going to do this one. So I'm going to select that, hit Shift-I, so it's the only thing visible, and we're going to kind of go from that. So we could do this any number of ways. I could select faces and try to get them done that way, but what we're going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and do automatic. I usually do automatic first, see what that gives me, and then if it's good, I'll use that, instead of having to go through and manually do it. So, oops, double clicked it. Okay, so if you look at it, When it's a squarish object like this one, usually automatic does pretty well, because what it does is it looks for planes, and basically it'll cut everything that's a plane into a section. And since this is very, you know, quadrat, I was saying rectilinear, but that's 2D, but since it's very much like that, it's actually cut pretty well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the sections that are fine, and I'm just going to throw them over there. And I'm going to go ahead and just use that UV tool here. So if you look, you see like this little seat part here, that looks good. So I'm just going to take that and move that guy out of here. The bottom also looks good. Move that out of there. The back does not look good, so I'm going to hold out on that. Let me see. The side does not look good. Front is not good. Is this good? No. This top's good. I'll move that top out of here. And let's see. Anything else? Is that all that's good in this? Is all that's good and holy? Alright, so let's fix the back, because that one's pretty close to being good, and we're just going to go ahead and basically cut that so that we can cut the back out. So when I'm looking at this, you can see we got to make a decision on where we want the back to be. So I'm going to say probably where it is good, so I'm going to say that line's fine. Let's go ahead and do symmetry so that we do it on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and do Object X. Let me just double check to make sure that this is indeed Object X is what I want. And I am not getting that. Hang on a second. Let's try this. Let's do Edit, delete all by type history, modify freeze transformations, modify center pivot. Alright, let's see now if I grab something over here. Let me see. Vertex. Symmetry doesn't work. Okay. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. I don't usually trust symmetry, to be honest. Okay. So, basically, that scene looks good, but then I need to make it basically come over here, because when I'm looking at the top, that's clearly where the top is. So you can see it's got to shift over one. So I got to kind of decide where I want that shift to start. And do I want to go, you know, I'm going to say this thing ends here. So actually I'm going to go right where it is. I'm going to go here to here, and then I'm just going to have it go up. So this one, I'm on edges, this one, and let's go ahead and do that over here as well. So it cuts in this one, and let's just go to cut and sew section, and cut. Okay? And then I'm just going to go ahead and go UV shell, select it, and move this guy out of there, and that one's also good now too. Yay, getting it done. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and do this side panel, because this should be pretty easy. So, this is right where the line is. So I'm going to go to Edges. I'm going to select this guy. Hold Q. And I'm just going to double click to here. Alright, like that. And let's also do it on this side. Get to do everything twice. This, hold Shift, double click, and let's go ahead and cut. And again, UV shell, this guy, and let's go ahead and get you the heck out of there. Yay. Okay. Front's also pretty easy, so let's go ahead and grab that one to this one. Nope. Let's try that again. This one to that one. This one to that one. And let's hit G for cut, since it was the last thing I did. UV shell, select that guy, and move him out of there as well. Great. Okay. And let's look at, so we got that panel. We're going to do these arms last because they're the most complicated. So let's go ahead and look at this. So you can see the seam comes across, and it kind of goes up and over, which is weird. So let's go to Edge. I need to just basically cut this. Click on that and hit G, because it was the last thing I did still. And we're going to do the same thing over here. And we'll hold, click on that, and G, cut. Okay. So now those are both, oops, sorry, UV shell. This and this can now be moved out of there. Great. Okay. And I think these fronts actually are good too. So I'll take those two, get those out of there. Alright. And so now we just need to basically make this section come across better than it currently is, and kind of go from there. Alright, so I'm going to turn those off because I don't find that particularly useful. Okay, so I got to determine where I want this to. I'm thinking that it would make sense for this to basically come across and get cut to here. I mean, I know this is here, but this is kind of a weird cut. I don't really like the way that looks. This is clearly that line, so we're just going to continue this across. So I'm just going to go to, oops, that's what I want. I'm going to go to edge here to here and cut. Just holding hit G again, and we're going to do the same thing again over here. So here to here, G, good. So that cuts that across, and then I'm thinking, if you look, you can see right where this 3 is here. I'm thinking that's going to be the one side, and this is going to be this side. That's fine. So I'm going to take this one, and this one, and this one, and we're going to sew those together. So same thing here. This guy, this guy, this guy, and we're just going to go ahead. Now you'll see that there are a couple different options for sewing. There's the sew tool, which I don't really like. It's kind of like the where's that cut tool? You're meant to do it in here, but it's like weird, so I think it's easier to see it in 3D. So there's sew. What will sew do is that it'll actually take the two, and it won't change their position. It'd make more sense if I show you. Watch, if I hit sew, it's going to take those edges and slap them on down there. But if you do stitch together, it'll actually move the objects to there and snap them together. So I usually just do stitch together pretty much every time. Sew is not as useful for that. Okay, that is good. Alright, so now what we need to do, so I got a top, and good. Alright, so, is that right? Why does that look weird? Oh no, that's right. Okay, so if you look at here, I don't like this seam here is in the wrong spot. It should be up here. I get why it did it, because there again is that 3 thing, but you see that's too low. So I'm going to grab this one, I'm going to hold shift, and double click, and this one, and hit G, since the last thing I did was sew. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. Click on this one, click here, double click, and G. So that will sew that together. And then this is also a weird, I know technically this is an underlapping part, but I'm just going to keep it as part of it. I don't want to have too many seams like where they're unnecessary, because if you think about this, this would sew all the way down. So I'm going to select this and go all the way to here, and then these two, and G to sew. And we'll do the same thing over here as well. Click, double click, 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 and G. Great. Okay. So now that's all one piece, and let's go ahead and cut this. I'm going to click here to here, and I'll hit cut. Click here, oops, come on, click there, hold shift, double click, and hit G for cut, because we already did it. Alright, so now we're going to see, do we have our panels? Okay. So I got the inside panel looks good, I think, because I think that's all one chunk. That looks good, the front's good. The top, I think, is also good. It's going to cut in and across and around, that's fine. But the side panel, you can see it's got, I got this extra nublet here. I'm just going to have that as part of the whole thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew that. So I'm going to grab this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Then we're going to hit stitch together. And we're going to do the same thing here. This one, this one, this one, and this one, and G. Okay, so these are all very weird. So we're going to go ahead and, we're going to go ahead and just go to UV, select all of them, and hit unfold, and that will clean them up. Okay, and now all of the pieces are officially good. So let's go ahead and select everything, and let's hit layout. Boop. Okay, great. Now, we'll go ahead and click and look for stretching, and you can see pretty white. Looks pretty good. Not too bad. But another thing we can do is, I kind of did it earlier. Let's turn that back off. We don't need you. Is this checkers thing? Okay. So what the checkers does is it basically it kind of does some of the stretching too. It'll let, if you see like an irregular UV, let me see, if I grab, let's say something like this, and if I see an irregular square, I'll know that there's a UV off. See how I move that one, and it makes it all odd here. Also, sometimes it makes it a little bit easier to see exactly, you know, if I stretch this out this way, I don't even know where that is. Here we go. You can see how it's not square, right? The thing I like to use it for the most, though, is basically the sizing. So if you look, see how big these squares are, let's say, compared to these back squares, right? It's not like a lot, but they look like they're a little bit bigger than these back ones. So I'm going to grab those, just double click on the UVs there. I'm going to hold shift and double click this one. And I'm just going to go ahead, if they're too big, that means they need to take up more space. I'm just going to click and drag them to make them a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to look to see if there's any other areas that need to be bigger or smaller. I mean, mine's pretty good by default here. But basically, if you notice that some squares are gigantic compared to other squares, just go ahead and scale them. Don't worry about them overlapping yet. I'm going to grab the whole thing again. I'm going to turn this back off, the checkers. And we'll hit layout again. Okay. Wait a minute, did it just? It did just. That's stupid. Okay, and we'll move them up here. All right. And that looks pretty good. Now, again, these are all a little bit comfy cozy for my likings. Not a huge fan of how tight these are, so it might make sense to just spread them out. So I'm going to grab all of them, and I'm just going to scale them down a little bit. All right, and that way I'll have a little bit of room to kind of spread them out. So I'm just going to go ahead and go up to that UV shell tool thing. And I'm just going to move this guy down here, move this one like this. I'm going to take this guy, put him up in the corner. And then, let's see. I might be able to maximize the space a little bit better in a different way. Put you guys in there for now. Just want to make sure there's gaps and things. There we go. I'll put you here. Put you maybe like that. And oops, thank you. Put you like this. Put this one next to that one. Now, you could try to organize this in a way that basically makes it look like the couch. Particularly when you're painting 2D, that's super useful because, you know, that way you know what you're painting when you're painting it. When you're painting in a 3D program, obviously it doesn't quite matter as much. I am going to just wing it, though, so we'll call that good. So there's a little bit of gaps and stuff, but that way there's a little bit more room between everything. Everything's a little bit more well laid out. I'm also trying to make a point to make things straight so that when I do put my texture on there, they will be in line with the model. Like, so what I don't want is something like this. Don't have things like this. Because that way if you go to put a square picture in here, right, if the lines go like this, it's going to be crisscrossed on the thing. So try to have your elements straight to the direction that they are. So even like these things, it might make sense to try and straighten them out a little bit so that they are more in line with the fabric. So let's straighten this guy out. Unless they're not supposed to be. I mean, kind of. Alright, so we'll call that good. And let's just go ahead and save this. I'm going to save this as the end one. Okay, good. Yep. Alright. So let's go UV. Or, I'm sorry, not that. Alright. So let's do with nothing selected, hit Shift I, so we have everything back. Alright. And that looks acceptable. Now, there's two ways we can go about doing this. So before I say this is good and we'll start texturing and stuff, if you look right now, each object is a separate object, as it should be because they are separate objects, right? But you can see they're each taking up a full UV space, and that's totally fine. However, if for some reason, if you're making a video game and stuff, you don't want every single... So if you're familiar with doing 2D artwork for a video game, right? You might notice that when you do the 2D artwork, right, you do Sprite Sheets. So instead of having a picture, a different picture for every single frame of, like, let's say a walk sequence of your character, right? What you'll do is you have one big picture, and each frame is inside of that. Now, the reason why we do that Sprite Sheet, is because when the game goes to run, what it does, it has to load one larger picture in the beginning, right, up front, and then it will just cut to each part of that picture. Like, it just basically crops out the rest and only will look at different parts. If instead you did have it that every frame was a different picture, it has to load in the picture, show it, destroy it, load in a new picture, show it, destroy it, as opposed to just loading in a picture once. So it's actually a lot, it saves memory and stuff and things like that. So it's more performance efficient, okay? We can kind of do a similar idea inside of video games. Now, if I was going to do this and I was just going to render it and stuff, I could not do this because you can just deal with it. But if you're trying to worry about performance, what you can do is what we call atlas our textures. So what that means is that you, even if they're different objects, like you could have multiple objects like this chair and this chair and this and maybe that, and they all share the same material and they all share the same texture. But instead of this taking up the entire space, you have this take up like this corner, and then the chair takes up this corner, and the next chair takes up that corner. And what you do is you put a bunch of textures all on one picture. You might have noticed when you play a 3D video game, sometimes when you load the video game up, it doesn't happen as much now, but especially last gen, when you load the video game in, initially the game will show, you'll see all the characters and what have you, and the environments, and then, but they'll all be kind of flat shaded, right? Like they'll just be bare colors, and all of a sudden you'll see a pop, like the textures pop in. The reason why that's happening is that the video game has to load in one larger picture in the beginning, so it takes longer for the initial loading. However, the game will run faster afterwards, as opposed to having to run in multiple ones. So let's do the same thing here, just because it's good practice and all that other business. So what we're going to do is this. I'm going to go to object mode, and I'm going to select all of them, minus this thing. I'm going to hit Shift-I, so I don't have anything else selected. And now you can see everything's in here. I don't want to just hit layout, though, because then it's going to put all those things in weird places and stuff, and I'd rather not do that. So I'm going to select this. Let's go to UVs, and I'm just going to scale it down a little bit, because if you think about it, this takes the vast majority of it. So I'm going to scale this down, let's say about that much. Put this up in the corner. I'm going to grab this one. Let's grab this and scale this down. And let's put this in this corner, and grab this one, and scale this down, and let's put this in this corner, and let's stack it this way instead. And then these guys are like just worthless, so these really don't matter. So I'm gonna scale these guys down a whole lot. Okay. Let's grab the whole thing, and now we can kind of see what we're working with here. All right. So, I say what we do is I'm going to grab, let's go to UVs. I'm going to grab all of these, and I'm going to scale these bigger, like so. Take these, I'm going to scale these bigger. So they should be equivalent to the pieces there. So let me see, that to that. That's all, let's scale it down a little bit. Okay, and I'm thinking with these, I could rotate them this way. Okay, let's move this over a little bit. Like so. And then we can move you guys both over quite a bit. And move that over. And then we could probably scale this up a little bit more. trying to use up as much screen real estate as possible. Okay. Now, let me show you another neat little trick. So if you want to try and like utilize your space as much as possible, you might have noticed that if I were to look, like let's say I grab this one, this is on top of another one, right? But this is supposed to be exactly the same. So like if I move this one out, watch. You see that's actually on top of this one. So there's actually multiple ones all on top of each other, but they're supposed to be the same anyway. So what I'm going to do is actually grab this and pull this guy and put it right on top of that one, because it doesn't really matter that much. Then I'm going to grab this one, put this one more or less on top of that one. And then we'll take this one and we'll put it kind of in the middle here. You're not going to see it anyway, because these can kind of share the same texture as well. Alright. And that will save some screen real estate. Now you can do the same thing also with these, but I'm not sure that they're exactly the same size, so I'm just kind of like, I'm going to leave that alone. But if you do know you have something that's exactly the same size, you can just put it right on top of each other. It actually used to be a thing they used to do in video games, where because characters are generally symmetrical, they would take a character and they would texture half of it. They would texture the whole character, and then would take half and flip the other half on top of itself. So that way they could have, instead of having like two sides of the face across this entire thing, they would just have one half of the face across it, but the other half was also on it, like it was just overlapping, and that way you would get twice as much texture space in essence, because you're cutting in half across two things. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is hit this checkers thing and see what my scaling is. So if you look, you can see these are too small right now, so I'm going to go ahead and scale these up bigger so that they're a little bit closer to the size of those. And then let me see what else. These are a little bit bigger than they need to be. Let's say bring that down a little bit. And let me see which this is. This cushion, those look acceptable. Okay, so I'm thinking this section could get scaled up a little bit more again. Scale it back down a touch. Okay. And we're going to call that good. So now, let's go ahead and turn that off. So now if you look, what you'll see is that I have these things, and they're all sharing the same UV space. They're all their own UVs, but when I select them all together, they take up one amount, right? So this could probably be a little bit, because you can see I do have some extra UV space in here, so this could be a little bit more efficient, but it's not terrible. All right, let's go ahead and just set this up. You know what? We'll do it in the next video. Okay, so yeah, because this is getting kind of long. So we're going to call that good for the UVs on this chair. And then we will continue on in the next video. This is probably going to be in 3 videos. I'm going to go ahead and save this real quick. This is probably going to be in like 3 videos, so lo siento. All right, we'll save this, and then we will carry on in the next one.